It's been a little over a year since Christopher Nolan's epic biopic Oppenheimer came out. And let me tell you, I can't remember the last time I had such an instant impact coming out of the theater like I did while watching Oppenheimer.
We're in a race against the Nazis.
In this video, after having watched Oppenheimer countless times, I'm gonna dissect the shit out of it on Premiere Pro with an analysis of Nolan's genius cinematic devices and the editing structure. In simple words, about the color versus black and white bits, fission versus fusion, a little bit about the historical timeline. We'll also talk a little bit about this controversial scene that didn't go too well with some janta in India.
गलत है इसे भी हटना चाहिए.
And one fascinating detail I bet you didn't know till probably the end of this video. Over the last few videos in this sub-series called Editable, we've seen how Christopher Nolan interweaves multiple timelines, experiments with different perspectives, and even uses non-linear narratives in his films. I've done an extensive deep dive on Dunkirk and Memento, but now we have come to a movie where Nolan audaciously uses all three techniques of film storytelling in what can be considered as one of the greatest films of all time, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is a story about one of the most important figures in history, a brilliant scientist but also a complex and conflicted human being who was haunted by the ethical implications of his work. Basically, his whole life was a battle between his conscience and his curiosity.
When we detonate an atomic device, we might start a chain reaction that destroys the world.
So how does Nolan make a film that combines elements of courtroom tension, romantic entanglements, scientific breakthroughs in the lab, and the charisma of lectures, all while resembling the quintessential monster movie?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
By breaking down his storytelling technique on the Editable, we'll see how he draws parallels with an atomic era Frankenstein, who eventually realizes how his creation further induces an inexhaustible thirst for devastation. Let's be honest, Nolan is an absolute master in exploring complex themes in his films. He's not afraid to tackle difficult subjects like morality, ethics, and the nature of reality. In his own words, Oppenheimer's story is all impossible questions, impossible ethical dilemmas, paradoxes. There are no easy answers in his story. There are just difficult questions, and that's what makes the story so compelling. It felt essential that there be questions at the end that you leave rattling in people's brains and prompting discussion. Oppenheimer, in my opinion, is structured to kind of resemble a mosaic and is brilliantly edited by Jennifer Lame to give that vibe. It skillfully weaves together the different facets of Oppenheimer's life, his rise, struggles, downfall, and the aftermath. While one might expect this fractured timeline to create confusion like Memento, it surprisingly simplifies Oppenheimer. Because of the flow of the scenes and the moral connections, this intertwining becomes far simpler to follow. Overall, with a runtime of 180 minutes, you'd think Oppenheimer is a slow burner, like a ticking time bomb. However, due to the continuous shifts between one, timelines, and two, color and black and white sequences, it ends up racing ahead, almost with a sense of urgency. Let's have a look at both the facets to see how exactly Christopher Nolan used them to keep the pace up throughout the film and also give you a sneak peek into Oppenheimer's complex mind. Like I said, the narrative very seamlessly traverses from one timeline to the other. The three primary timelines include Oppenheimer's early days, his time of research on the atom bomb, and the eventual court case in his latter years. The weaving of historical moments serve a dual purpose. Not only does it establish narrative connections, but also tries and mimics the science behind it. For example, the intercutting of emotional beats with images of quivering wavelengths and massive detonations at the beginning of the film just alludes to the genesis of the idea of the atom bomb itself, right? As well as showcases the erratic instability of Oppenheimer's paradoxical mind. The underlying concept is that by crafting the right narrative formula, one can trigger a significant chain reaction in the audience. Basically, like how an atom bomb works with a series of chain reactions is exactly the kind of reaction that he ends up getting from us as the audience. Did you, by the way, see a little bit of the resemblances between Social Network and Oppenheimer while watching the movie?
0.03%.
You signed the papers. You set me up.
Even while doing this, though there was total foreboding with the apple poisoning scene and Oppenheimer contemplating with the actions that can cause death, every time he reaches a stage like this in his life, he has his moral dilemma come in the way and it almost stops him from doing it. And the way Nolan chose to show it, that's just some epic genius shit. So let's bust this open on Premiere Pro to understand better what I mean. So as you can see from the sequences of scenes, the timeline continues to break and gets more chaotic towards the midpoint of the film, almost as if it is at the height of the fission, just before slowing down towards the end and culminating into fewer timelines, a lot like Fusion. So it's almost as if the entire editing itself mirrors how fission works and how fusion works. In the process, the film's structure highlights how events in one narrative thread can reverberate and yield rippling consequences years down the line.
And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The other story device he uses to move the plot forward is with varying perspectives. A first-person subjective perspective through the eyes of Oppenheimer himself, the color sequences, and an objective perspective presented through the lens of Louis Strauss, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, the black and white sequences. Don't get confused into thinking that this subjective objective piece that I'm talking about is based on the reliability of the information being presented. It's not as if Oppenheimer's story is made out of subjective recounts, whereas Louis Strauss's perspective on the entire set of things is as per how it was documented in history. Instead, think of it from the angle of the title cards established for either perspective. Fission for the Oppenheimer sections and fusion for the Strauss sections. Nolan uses these opposing nuclear forces not only to illustrate how Oppenheimer and Strauss pushed for different approaches to build the bomb, but also embody their contrasting worldviews. Just to clarify, time for a quick 10-second science lesson. While fission is the creation of mad energy by the splitting of atoms, the basis of the atomic bomb, fusion creates an even wilder amount of energy because of atoms combining, the basis of the hydrogen bomb. So, looking at things from Oppenheimer's perspective, Oppenheimer, a man of many contradictions, a communist who shuns the party, a brilliant theorist struggling with lab computations, a womanizer yearning to be indispensable to the women in his life, insists that these paradoxes can coexist. Clearly, his belief in the existence of so many contradictions is because of his lifelong fascination with quantum theory, a science of apparent paradoxes. Consequently, Oppenheimer perceives his morality as subjective, allowing him to act in ways that challenge his idealism yet coexist within his mind. And because of this compartmentalization of how he lives his life, we can see it all the more because of the editing of the film itself. Also emulating fission with the breaking like I mentioned earlier. The black and white sequences on the other hand have a lot less chaos around them. They're all aligned with Strauss's objective way of thinking, even though all his decisions are clearly marred by his subjective opinion of Oppenheimer.
He wanted to be the man who moved the earth. He talks about putting the nuclear genie back in the bottle. Well, I'm here to tell you that I know.
These sequences jump across timelines much lesser and have a far straighter approach in its flow, almost as if scenes and motifs are combining to give a sense of fusion. And while the entire story is told from two primary perspectives, Nolan doesn't shy away from including a third, that of Kitty, on multiple occasions, but this one in particular, where as the film progresses and Oppenheimer's psyche start to blur the lines between his inner thoughts and external reality, we see how the memories of his affair with Jean Tatlock unfold in the interrogation room in this amazingly edited scene. Despite all the ongoing drama, Nolan doesn't shy away from cutting to Kitty's painful point of view of her husband, with Tatlock glaring back at her, as if to twist the knife of a husband's betrayal in front of the whole world. And since the clothes are off, might as well talk about this controversial scene. So this scene involving the Bhagavad Gita wasn't originally part of the script. Nolan, who isn't really known for doing this kind of stuff, chose to include this in the movie as recommended by Cillian Murphy, who got so into this character and did some hard, deep research about Robert Oppenheimer. Cillian Murphy had read about Oppenheimer's deep connection with the Bhagavad Gita and how it influenced his thoughts, particularly during the Manhattan Project. What's even more interesting is that scene was actually shot in a single take, something that Nolan almost never does, who likes taking his coverage with multiple scenes and keeping his options open at the table. By the way, if you like the content thus far, then please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. We are movie buffs and we love doing this, but it does take time to put in all the effort, break this down, take it on Premiere Pro, do our own analysis. So show us some love if you like this kind of content. Also, if you're a Nolan fan like us, then do check out some of our designs in the shop linked in the description box below. Moving on and getting serious on Premiere Pro. So here's what the flow would have actually looked like if it was arranged in chronological order. This view gives us a very macro understanding of the entire double helix coil that I was talking about and why Nolan and Jennifer Lame chose to resequence the scenes this way, to make sure all those themes and motifs that we discussed actually come through. For example, had the film been presented chronologically, the entire bit over here of the story featuring Louis Strauss would have only been Act 3. In such an edit, the Einstein scene would have been the end of Act 2 instead of the Trinity test, which would otherwise have been the center point of the film. That structure doesn't really make a lot of sense clearly, as we can see. And that's why, thankfully, this edit isn't the drab version that we can see over here. Instead, it is meticulously woven together to give the audience a mind-numbing experience. Take the Einstein scene itself as an example. It is edited in such a way that it starts the film off from Strauss's perspective and ends with Oppenheimer's perspective, leaving the audience with the same horrors that he battled with throughout the second half of the film. And this kind of editing structure that takes the entire film in a total circle is very similar to, say, what we saw even in Citizen Kane, with the entire Rosebud MacGuffin. Apart from the Einstein scene, both perspectives entangle with each other on a couple of other occasions as well. One, like you can see over here, right? Which is the Atomic Energy Commission's meet right after the Soviet Union's first unsuccessful atomic bomb test. This scene is also very important because it's the first time we see Oppenheimer's apprehension of a nuclear arms race. We can see how important this moment is because it comes twice in the movie, once smack in the middle of the film. So to conclude, like all of Nolan's movies, Oppenheimer is a testament to his ability to transform traditional narrative structures and create an immersive cinematic experience like no other. This unconventional approach, as much as it challenges viewers time and again, it continues to actively engage them, just as the protagonist grapples with his choices and their repercussions. The film constantly moving towards a larger narrative while adding an intellectual depth, constantly encourages viewers to ponder the connections between science, morality, and the human capacity for creation and destruction. Much like Oppenheimer's atomic ambitions, Nolan's film creation is a force to be reckoned with, leaving an intense mark on cinema.
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
Hope you like this breakdown and analysis on Oppenheimer. If you did, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And if you want to check out more such crazy stuff on Nolan's films and an analysis that we have done on Premiere Pro, then do check out the one on Dunkirk or Memento.